Howdy! The NBA season is just a few weeks away, so I wanted to throw some general NBA content your way in the form of my 2024-25 power rankings. I'm going to drop these in 3 different videos periodically over the next couple weeks. Really, it's a way to throw some thoughts out on every team, make some predictions, and just talk a little ball before we enter what should be a really fun NBA season. Obviously, there's a ton of factors that go into a team's success over the course of an 82-game season, so these are sure to be off base pretty much as soon as the season starts, but we're going to give it our best shot. Pound for pound, as it stands right now, the Wizards are slated to be the worst team in the NBA next season, and that's of course by design, with their franchise pivoting to a full rebuild just over a season ago. The team has some seasoned vets capable of winning games: Malcolm Brogdon, Kyle Kuzma, Jonas Valanciunas. But the path forward for Washington will be leaning into and developing its young crop of players. In number 2 overall pick Alex Sarr, now sophomore Bilal Coulibaly, Bub Carrington, Keyshawn George, and more. Sarr right now is likely the focal point, a 7'1" forward with premier mobility and shot blocking instincts. He was the rightful second pick just a few months ago, but suffered through a pretty abysmal summer league, leaving his talent somewhat in question. I'm still pretty bullish on his long-term outcome. I think Coulibaly is an awesome piece that stands to get a lot better next season, and I'm hopeful they've hit on another 2024 draftee in either Bub or George. Otherwise, this roster looks to be about the 30th best in the league to me. I'm not sold on Jordan Poole as a positive contributor, and the rest of the vets seem to be placeholders until Washington inevitably brings in more young talent. Expect the Wizards to be contending for the number 1 pick in 2025. At number 29, we have the Brooklyn Nets, who many experts believe will be the worst team in the league next season. In order for that to happen though, they're going to have to offload some veterans because as it stands right now, this team is capable of winning games. Their best asset at the moment is Nick Claxton, a 7-footer who will undoubtedly earn some DPOY respect again next season at just 25 years old, and should be around for the long haul in this rebuild. Next to Claxton is Cam Thomas, a 22-year-old hyper scorer who's quickly amassed a patented offensive game, but it's not yet known if he'll be able to impact the game in other areas. Following those two are some highly coveted win-now assets, albeit ones that should be on the move before long: Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Ben Simmons, Dennis Schroeder, among others. Brooklyn does have a somewhat patched together young core of really unproven guys: Noah Clowney, Dariq Whitehead, Jalen Wilson, but these are all players that likely need some real in-house development before they become viable as pieces. Their ranking at number 29 is somewhat projection, but if Brooklyn can tear it down just a bit more, they'll be in competition for some of the top 2025 draft pieces. At number 28, or number 3 if you're here for the reverse standings, is the Portland Trailblazers, another pretty fresh rebuilding team who's somewhat stuck between win-now talent and up-and-coming prospects. They kicked off their rebuild with the selection of Shaedon Sharpe at number 7 in 2022, and followed that up with taking the widely loved Scoot Henderson at number 2. So far, both of these guys have somewhat underachieved. Sharpe played in just 32 games as a sophomore, seeing some inefficiency overall, and is already hurt again ahead of next season. And Scoot saw one of the tougher rookie seasons last year, shooting 39% overall and dishing out 3.4 turnovers per game to boot. Most simply, neither player has made the game look easy. This season, they somewhat went against their usual grain in grabbing UConn 7-footer Donovan Clingan at number 7, who does project to be an immediate plug-and-play behemoth in the paint. There's reason for optimism regarding Portland's rebuild so far. I think they clearly have talent. Sharpe is freshly 21 years old, still has loads of time, and Scoot would be among the top of players I'd bet on based on work ethic alone. Not to mention Portland has pieces in DeAndre Ayton, Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, and more to make up ground on their Western Conference competitors, but next season will be extremely informative for the Trailblazers as a whole. I've long said the Utah Jazz have puttered around that middling level of the NBA, not quite in contention for either championships or top draft picks. But the more I look at this roster, the more that really only applies to star Lauri Markkanen. He earned an all-star bid for the first time last season and is one of the better combo forwards in the league, but the surrounding roster isn't great, especially if the team leans more into development and less into win-now players. Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, and John Collins are more than capable, but will an NBA franchise really prioritize those guys over its upcoming youth? That's doubtful. I'm a huge fan of Utah's pieces, and I'm on record as a massive fan of Keontae George and Isaiah Collier, but the Jazz have an ultra-specific core of young prospects that I don't think becomes impactful overnight or even in a full season. Maybe more than any other team, these guys really need development, so I could see their 2024-25 season being a tad rough. Regardless, I think this Utah roster will have a few caterpillars turned butterflies soon enough. At number 26, we have the Detroit Pistons, truly one of the hardest teams to rank out of all 30. My heart tells me that this team really has accumulated the talent to win some basketball games and end their recent streak of misery. But a quick roster comparison coupled with their success rate in recent years lands them right back here at number 26. I've liked nearly all the players Detroit has grabbed in the last few drafts. Cade Cunningham is an NBA star and a player I think will see true success one day, be it in Detroit or elsewhere. Ivy and Duren were strong picks relative to where they were drafted. Azar was an easy bet as an NBA contributor due to his transcendent athleticism, and Ron Holland was my personal top prospect in 24. But the team has just not found the right recipe to make these ingredients work. And now, after another front office and head coaching change, it seems they're going to throw it at the wall again in hopes that it sticks. Now, they finally added some much-needed low-cost veterans that should make things easier. Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Fontecchio. I really believe that helps integrate the youngsters more and leads to Detroit winning more games next season. But in order for this team to make a sizable jump, one or more of its top draft picks are going to have to make major developmental leaps. And even then, it might not lead to them passing up other teams just yet. I'm a fan of you, Detroit. Just don't tell anyone. 25th, and probably just a tinge too low, is the Toronto Raptors, which reads like a freshly rebuilt team, but one that's really only drafted a handful of its major contributors. The headliner here is Scotty Barnes, a player you absolutely want at the core of any team, but RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly flank him, and were both trade additions after offloading OG Anunoby just last season. Then you've got the handful of late lottery picks either drafted or also acquired via trade in Grady Dick, Davion Mitchell, and Ochai Agbaji. For my money, this could be one of the more polarizing teams in the league. If players fail to assimilate around Barnes and the team really leans into youth development, it could hover around 25 to 30 wins yet again. But there's also a chance that Barrett adapts to fresh scenery, quickly continues to add to his game, and the surrounding young core makes modifications to their game, and it could be better than advertised at the moment. As an aside, I have not and will never let go of my Grady Dick stock. I think he's phenomenal. I've picked the former result for the Raptors, but the latter wouldn't necessarily come as a surprise. Regardless, I think this team needs to leave the 2025 NBA draft with a real talent. Ranked number 24 are the Chicago Bulls, who stand to be one of my favorite League Pass teams this season due to their wide range of outcomes. Over the offseason, Chicago offloaded Alex Caruso straight across for 22-year-old point guard Josh Giddey, a trade I'm on record liking more for the Bulls than most, and they also let DeMar DeRozan walk in free agency, a move I think will have more league-wide implications than previously thought. With those two players gone, I could easily see this team winning significantly less games, but a few things still stand in its way. It still has a fairly nice core of win-now players in Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, Patrick Williams, Torrey Craig, Chris Duarte, Javon Carter, Jalen Smith. While those players aren't good enough to get them over the Eastern Conference hump, they are good enough to field a competitive roster night in and out, especially when its quote-unquote young guys are Giddey and Kobe White, who are developed enough to win games. In order to land a true top pick, the Bulls will need to continue to trade off some talent, but if it can center itself around White, Giddey, and number 11 pick Modest Buzelis, you draft a top talent in 2025, and I think you're on the right track. 23rd, we have the LA Clippers, another team with the potential to really win some games or go down in a fiery blaze. Paul George left for greener pastures this offseason, leaving the aged Kawhi Leonard and James Harden behind on a pretty bare-bones roster. Still, those two are some of the greatest players ever, and if they can stay healthy, this team will have a shot at surprising in the West. Even aside from Leonard's offseason surgery and injury history, I'm personally just not feeling this roster. I think Harden still has most of what made him a great player, but the surrounding core being Ivica Zubac, Terrence Mann, Norm Powell, as good as this Western Conference is, just leaves a lot to be desired for me. Is this LA Clippers core really capable of withstanding the onslaught of current and upcoming talent in the West? I'm not so sure, and that's why I've projected them to finish lower than most everybody else. The only catch with the Clippers is that while other teams will eventually pivot to draft mode, they won't have that luxury with OKC owning their selections, meaning their final record might end up a little more sparkly than the season truly was. A team I have projected to rise in the overall standings after finishing tied for bottom 3 last season is the Charlotte Hornets, who are starting to put together a roster that I think is really intriguing. LaMelo Ball has proven he can be a successful point guard when healthy, and there's very few young wings I'd take over Brandon Miller, if any, given his rookie year success. I'd wager he's actually in line for a huge jump next year, all things considered, and pieces like Grant Williams, Mark Williams, Josh Green, Vasa Micic, Trey Mann, and Seth Curry have me pretty bullish on their rotation overall. I think in order for the team to truly make a memorable leap, they'll need the freshly drafted Tijon Salone, who won't be much help as far as next season goes, or a future draftee to pan out, but I'm starting to like where the Charlotte roster is headed with its lengthy sharpshooter duo front and center. Rounding out the video as the number 21 ranked team is the Atlanta Hawks, who I do think have a lot of talent but are probably going to use this year to figure some things out. Trae Young remains an essential superstar in the league, but there's still questions around him being a centrifugal offensive piece. The number 1 pick in the draft, Zachary Riza-Shea, stands to be a great long-term piece as a lengthy combo forward, but probably won't be heavily impactful as early as next year. And other young talents like Jalen Johnson and new guard Dyson Daniels are just that, but need more consistency before I put real stock in their play. Players like Capella, Bogdanovich, Hunter, Okongwu, and more vault the Hawks over some other middling teams, but I think this will very much be a reset season for Atlanta. And I could see them on the outside looking in of the playoffs or even play in, especially after rightfully shipping off a great contributor in DeJounte Murray.